So, welcome. We are continuing our talks about the sacred feminine and Buddhist philosophy and the sacred feminine within Buddhist philosophy. And again, one of the places that we are focusing in order to understand and evoke and articulate all of the ways in which the sacred feminine informs Buddhist philosophy is by looking at and understanding better the Buddhist goddess Tara. And so, as we learn how to integrate Tara's expressions of the great feminine into our lives, it's helpful to remember that we can receive the same guidance that the monks in the last video received. Remember the story about the monks who were trying to move through the mountain passes during a snowstorm as they were fleeing the Chinese troops during the occupation of Tibet in 1959. So they received, and if you haven't seen that video, you can go ahead and take a look on the same YouTube channel and you'll see that video and you can hear that whole story about how the monks received guidance and support from Tara as they were fleeing during a time of great danger. And, you know, this is something that we can remember because even if we are fighting for our lives in different ways, if we are fighting to maintain balance in our lives in different ways, perhaps in the face of it, we may be struggling with an addiction, or we may be wanting to be able to extend our capacity to extend kindness to strangers. We can continually strive to understand how compassionate support can help us come into balance. So if we're trying to struggle with our own internal processes, or if we're trying to develop a greater capacity to be with other people's difficulties, the development of this understanding of this compassionate, this caring, this willingness to engage is something that we can develop. And these are all qualities of the sacred feminine that Tara expresses through her teachings in Buddhist philosophy. And when we seek to understand the power of compassion that she demonstrates, we find that we can be supported and we can be able to step into a happier life and a more fulfilled life. And as we approach the ways in which we may have become out of balance, having compassion for ourselves and for others can assist us as we try to return to balance. And in order to be able to return to balance, we have to know ourselves. And one of the things that we can get confused about is who we are and what we need, right? And one of the ways that we can come back to balance is by creating spaciousness within us so that we can see ourselves better and so that we can see our situation around us better. So many of us are caught in the forward rush in our fast-paced world, and we don't know how to create this spaciousness in our lives. However, it is possible, and spaciousness is one of the key qualities of the sacred feminine and one of the key qualities that Tara exhibits. And it's interesting because spaciousness is an inward movement, which is complementary to the aspect of the principle of the masculine principle, which is external movement. So when we have, our world tends to be a little bit toward the external, a little bit more toward the masculine. So if we develop this spaciousness, this internal spaciousness, we can balance out our engagement and begin to find more peace internally and be able to extend that peace into the world around us. And we can find that our actions can become more effective and that we're able to rest more deeply. And in order to do this, we have to actually understand what spaciousness is. And I think many of us do have a conflicted relationship with spaciousness. I think that because the culture tends to block it out, that we don't know quite what to do with it. I'm going to tell you a story about one of my students that struggled with this. You may recognize some of your own experience in it. But one of the ways in which we can learn about this spaciousness is to look into some of the teachings of Tara within Buddhist philosophy And there are several very important texts related to Tara. And one of them is called A Crown Ornament for the Wise. And it so beautifully places Tara's activities within this spaciousness. And a crown ornament for the wise, as I say, is a teaching that is a very traditional teaching. It's often in verse form so that people can, it's almost always in verse form, because people can memorize it more easily. And I'd like to just break out 3 of the different verses from this beautiful poetry in textual form, this teaching in a poetic and beautiful text. And again, this is from the Crown Ornament for the Wise. And we begin with verse 15. And this is talking about Tara and talking to Tara. Your infinite insight, an ocean-like treasury of knowledge that can describe all things. Your mind rules the 10 powers. I bow down to you, you who extend beyond the limits of all wisdom. And the next verse is, though dwelling in peace, you are moved by compassion. In your arms of altruism, you carry beings struggling in this ocean of misery to liberation. I bow down to you, you who extend beyond the limits of all compassion. And the next verse, peace and prosperity, power and wrath, you and your miracle making, like the tides of the ocean, never rest, but flow freely like an unbroken stream to benefit all who surround you. I bow down to you, you who extend beyond the limits of all action. And here you really see how this poetry captures her expression of spaciousness and her willing to dedicate spaciousness and balance to assist and to bring compassion and altruism, both to herself, and compassion and altruism to others, and of course, compassion to others. So this poetry points to the vastness of the wisdom of Tara and the wisdom that she embodies and that she nourishes. And it is out of this unbroken stream of vastness, beyond the end of wisdom, beyond the end of compassion, and beyond the end of action, that this peace and spaciousness arises and continues. And just meditating on that, to think, what is it to go beyond the limits of compassion? What is it to go beyond the end of action? Just meditating on that as you focus on Tara can be very instructive. And this is why Tara is called the mother of all Buddhas. Everything emerges from this wisdom, this compassion, and this action, and everything returns to it. So this ocean-like space supports everything and gives birth to all things, the way a mother gives birth to and supports her children. This tremendous power is fundamental to the expression of the great feminine as we begin to reclaim and embody it in our everyday lives. By aligning with these qualities in our own lives and being willing to defend our right to peace, to compassion, to power, we can change our experience of unhappiness. The 10 powers that are referred to relate to the different capacities that we can develop through our dedication to our own self-development. By studying the way that Tara expresses these capacities, we can learn how important they are to helping us develop. And this is something that we can do in further videos, or you can read in further texts, and certainly something we explore throughout the Applied Buddhist Psychology program here at the Sacred Stream. So by returning to this sense of spaciousness, we can come to know ourselves better. If we can take the time to cultivate a more balanced relationship with space, problems which seem to be intractable can be solved. And we can engage with long-standing conundrums and see a path to resolution when we have enough spaciousness. If we do not take the time and space to address issues or solve problems that arise unexpectedly, we run the risk of losing a sense of order in our lives. And I think that many of us do feel that loss of order during these difficult times. And we can become harried, we can become disorganized, we can become confused about how to meet the challenges of our everyday life. But if we give ourselves enough time to rest, to think, to reflect on our lives, on our dreams and our desires, we are creating the space to conceive of our lives in a new way. Sometimes when we allow ourselves the time and space to take a step away from the everyday rush, we can become disoriented for a moment. I think many of us remember when the pandemic began, all of the rush stopped, and many of us felt that disorientation. And I'd like to recount a story about a student of mine who had that same rush stop as she took early retirement from a high-powered job in an investment bank. After all the retirement parties were over, she said she woke up one weekday morning and did not know what to do with herself. She tried to keep herself busy, but she found that she didn't know what she actually wanted to do. And she didn't actually know who she was and what she would want to do if she did know who she was. She was very, very disoriented. And she was coming to me for help with this. So I suggested that she sit for a while without trying to keep herself busy, without even trying to meditate, just sit. And she blanched at this idea. And she said that whenever she was not keeping herself busy, she started having panic attacks. And this was something that had been going on for her since college. So I offered to sit with her and to see what it would be like for her to have someone with her as she was trying to allow a little bit of space so that she might feel a little bit more secure if the panic were to take hold. As we sat together, she did indeed begin to tremble and she started breathing quickly. And I asked her to try to weather the fear that was coming up by keeping breathing into it and creating space around it. And in about 15 minutes, she started breathing normally. So we got through that. And I asked her what was going on for her once her breathing returned to normal. And she said she truly was afraid that she did not know who she was. She said she was reminded of feeling this way in college and that she dealt with it by becoming as busy as she could. And she had been doing that ever since. She did a double major and she made sure her summers were filled with internships. And it was only when she was charging from one goal to another and from one promotion to the next that she felt stable. And she confessed that she thought she was going crazy when these problems came up in college and that she thought she was going crazy now. So I suggested that she learn how to meditate a bit more formally so she could create a bit of internal space. And we're going to do that in just a little bit so you can see what that looks like. And so she learned to meditate and she began seeing a therapist who could help her come to terms with the fear of going crazy. By her own admission, she had spent her whole life trying to be, as she said, more macho than the guys in her office in order to feel good about herself. By always being productive and externally oriented, she could feel imbalance. But when she had to come internal and when she had to learn about the movement of power that is so typical of the power of the sacred feminine inward, she felt out of balance. So she really did need to come into balance between these two movements. And so there was a lot of issues that were out of balance for her that needed to be addressed. But on a fundamental level, she was out of tune with the spaciousness of the balanced feminine experience. And so when we allow ourselves, when we find ourselves, you may recognize aspects of this story in your own experience, or you may know someone close to you that has these kinds of issues. And the important thing to remember is to know that we can allow ourselves the time and space to address issues we don't understand. And when we do this, things can become clearer. This was true for my student, and it can be true for you. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to just do a short meditation together to help you develop a little bit of inner spaciousness. And there's a longer meditation of this same process at the sacredstream.org website, and you can see the link in the card afterwards. So just allowing yourself to get settled, and just allowing yourself to feel the surface under you, noticing all the places where it meets the different parts of your body. And as you do, just noticing where your breath is. Noticing as you breathe in where your breath goes, and noticing as you breathe out where your breath goes. And if any other thoughts should come into your mind, just let them pass through like clouds passing through the sky, and then return to your breath. Staying focused only on your breath. Remembering the past is gone forever, and the future is not yet here. All you have is the present moment and your breath. And you can stay here as long as you like, watching your breath. And just noticing if you begin to notice a bit of spaciousness arising at the end of your meditation. Thank you.